18th, 2024. Welcome to the Wealth for Real YouTube channel live stream. I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio, coming on to talk to you guys about the Federal Reserve's decision to cut interest rates by 50 basis points or 0.5%, changing the rate from, I think it was 5.25, between 5.25 to 5.75, and dropping it or 5.25 to 5.5, dropping it down to 4.75 to 5. So you used to have a range there for the Fed. Range fell by 0.5%. Promise while I'm driving, keeping the road. Only look down when I stop for anybody. So, here's the deal, guys. First of all, there was a lot of talk about this in general. Are they going to cut rates or not? I think over the last couple weeks, we settled into the notion that they were going to cut. Everybody thought they were going to cut. Then the question became how much? That was the big question. How much are they going to cut? And it was either, 25, kind of like a definite, 50 maybe, 75 if it's a shocker. And then some people were like, well, it would be a real shocker if they didn't cut at all, because they kind of were indicating they would. I mean, I didn't think that was going to happen, but I did see some chatter about that. So they went ahead and they cut the middle of those three options, right? Did the 50 basis points. And there's a couple interesting things to note about that, I think. And I'm just going to tackle them in random order. Number one, the stock market didn't seem to react in an outsized way. I checked it at like 2:30, 3 o'clock, I think it was. And, it was up, it was green. It had turned upward from earlier in the day, I believe. I think it was like just a shade or two down earlier in the day. So, it had a positive effect in the very immediate sense. But it wasn't like some rip-roaring celebration occurred on Wall Street. And I don't know that that necessarily matters to anybody or not. It was more of a curiosity that I was kind of like plugged into individually. I wanted to see what happened. The real telling thing is going to be over the next several weeks, right? And of course, into the long term, where I think the long-term effects of this will eventually manifest. But if you're talking about sort of like an immediate reaction type of thing, one day or one afternoon is too immediate, right? We have to look a little bit further ahead than that. So that was the first thing. Stock market had a mild reaction to it. Maybe it went up more than that. I mean, honestly, guys, I should have checked it before I jumped on here. So maybe in the last hour of trading, maybe it really did go through the roof. I don't know. So I doubt it. Okay, so that brings me to the second item. It's what happens over the coming weeks. So what's interesting, guys, what's really interesting, and I've seen this in a few different places. I wish I could credit exactly who posted this or who dug this up, but I cannot, is that on September 18th, 2007, okay, so 17 years ago to the day, the Federal Reserve started cutting interest rates with the fear that the United States was heading into a recession, that there were economic issues and headwinds on the horizon, okay? Now, if you guys remember, I don't know, we got a couple viewers on right now, or whoever ends up watching this. If you remember, October 2007, the Dow Jones topped out somewhere in the 14,000s. And it was all downhill from there. Lost like 60% between October 07 and March 09. And that peak occurred about a month after the Federal Reserve started cutting rates. So the Federal Reserve cutting rates, while I'm sure on September 18th, 2007 appeared bullish, turned out to be quite bearish. And I mean, not only that, but it was a fucking disaster by the time all the dust settled. I don't mean just the rate cut was a disaster. I mean, the whole situation was a disaster by the time March 2009 arrived. And of course, the aftermath of the Great Recession went well past March 2009. I mean, March 2009 is where the stock market found its bottom. But that didn't mean people were back at work. That didn't mean banks got reopened. That didn't mean real estate was returned to its original owner. I mean, there was so much fallout across the board. It wasn't just about the stock market. But what's interesting to note, guys, is that the last time we were in a situation that looks or feels or smells or indicates anything like the situation we're in now, the last time we were there, the Federal Reserve pulled the same maneuver, and it just so happened to be on the exact same date 17 years ago, and it didn't work. Not only did it not work, but it led to the most catastrophic economic situation that the country had seen pretty much since the Great Depression. And it's interesting, I tend to think everybody knows about the Great Recession. Then I'm like, oh, wait a second. There's a lot of people, a lot of kids, a lot of younger people who either weren't alive for the Great Recession, or in most cases, they were alive, but they weren't tracking it because it didn't matter to them. They were too young, or they weren't in the workforce, or they didn't own property, or just, they weren't at a stage of life where it mattered as much. Let's put it that way. So, so anyway, if you weren't, if you fall into that category during the Great Recession, go do some research on it. Go check out what was going on at that time. And oh, by the way, when you do that research, you'll probably stumble across the fact that the Federal Reserve cut rates in September 07, and then the markets reached their peak in October of 07, and they proceeded to lose 60% value over the following 18 months. So anyway, so that's another notable thing here. The third notable thing about this, guys, is that there was a lot of speculation that the Federal Reserve, Chairman Powell, the governors would be in Kamala Harris's corner. Well, first they thought it was Joe Biden's corner. Now it's Kamala Harris's corner as we headed into the election, and would do something to try to tilt the election in favor of Harris versus Trump. Now, in the end, guys, if you've adjusted your framework to recognizing that, you live in an oligarchy, you don't live in a republic, you don't live in a democracy, you live in an oligarchy, then you probably realize that that's not as significant an observation as it sounds like when you put it against the backdrop of living, if you think you live in a democracy, though, whoever's watching this, you think you still live in a democracy, then that sounds shocking. Like, oh my God, like the Federal Reserve is trying to influence a free and fair election, and a very consequential election at that, right? Like it sounds real bad, and it looks like that's what they're doing, right? But when you adjust your framework and you realize you actually live in an oligarchy, i.e. power rests with the powerful, the elite, the wealthy, the politically connected, and you're like, yeah, that describes us 100%, then you realize what the Federal Reserve did maybe isn't so consequential in that regard. I mean, yeah, maybe they prefer Harris or Trump. Maybe. I don't know. I don't even know if that's a given. I mean, I think that might be sort of a logical conclusion, but I'm not totally sold on it. But even if they did, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the oligarchy is going to keep on oligarchying, and, whoever's president really doesn't matter that much to begin with. I mean, it's not like when Trump was there, he was like some populist fucking, crusader who was, doing all kinds of shit for the middle class. I mean, he gave his real estate rich buddies a big fucking tax break. Small businesses got a tax break, stuff like that. But it's not like, middle class families, walked away with a windfall. You know what I mean? Like from, and I shouldn't even be saying middle class, guys. I'm talking about the debtor class. We don't have a middle class. We have a poor, a wealthy, and a debtor class. The debtor class is the middle class masquerading as a middle class. But the real difference is they have access to credit. That's all. So really, the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates, you could argue, panders to the debtor class, because the debtor class needs credit to buy cars, buy college educations, buy homes, buy jet skis, buy little boats, go fishing on, whatever. So, that makes us feel wealthy, right? So maybe that's the pandering move there by the Federal Reserve. But anyway, my point, guys, going back to it, is that I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter, a lot of cynicism about, Kamala Harris called Jerome Powell to thank him for the 50 basis point rate cut and blah, 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 blah. And I mean, it's funny, and it might be true, but I don't think it's as consequential once you realize you live in an oligarchy, and the oligarchy is too resilient to need a particular president over another president. You know, it might have its favorite, it might have its preferred candidate, but it's not going anywhere. You know, it's not like Trump is going to come in and dismantle the oligarchy. I mean, fuck, he's like part of the oligarchy, whether he knows it or not, because he's wealthy. You know, he cares not about the fact that you or I can afford eggs or bread or anything like that. Believe me, he doesn't give a shit about that. So anyway, you know, bottom line, guys, is I just want to check in with you, talk about the rate cut, talk about that. You know, what I kind of think is going on there. You know, I've got some gold, I've got some Bitcoin. I do think Peter Schiff was saying, and others, that really this rate cut just raises the of inflation all over again. Just when we thought it was beat, it's just going to rear its ugly head all over again. And when that happens, you definitely want things like gold and Bitcoin and maybe real estate and things like that. You know, but you got to decide for yourself what's best. But that's what I'm looking for now, guys. I think this rate cut will help spur that inflation. And I think as the economy tilts over and really starts to go under, and they have to do more of these rate cuts, that is really going to accelerate this inflationary pressure. Just total guess on my part. I have no fucking clue what I'm talking about. But that's how I kind of see it. And that's how I think history kind of rhymes with this situation. So be really, really interesting to see, guys, what unfolds here in the coming weeks, coming months, coming year or two, as these rate cuts kind of kick in and take effect. So super excited to see what you guys think of this, what you guys' thoughts are on the rate cut, what your guys' thoughts are on this video. Like, share, subscribe. Super, super appreciate it. Everybody who is a subscriber, 119 of you, can't thank you enough. Can't believe 119 people actually want to hear what I have to say or are interested in it on any level. But yeah, really, really appreciate you guys. If you guys join the live stream or if you end up watching this video, thank you again. Hope everybody has a great Wednesday night, and we'll check in with you guys again later this week.